Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was created in the Narcissistic Spouses subreddit by a user named EmptyWater7794. The post is titled, "My narcissist husband tried to turn our friends against me after he cheated on me, so I destroyed him." A little long backstory. I, 26F, got together with my husband, 32M, 4 years ago during the COVID epidemic. We met online through our gaming community where we started talking every day while I was preparing for entrance exams for medical school. He was nice and sweet and shared many opinions with me. He even stood up for me when one of the guys in the gaming community tried to bully me. Long story short, we got together quite quickly and even moved in together. I agreed to move in with him to his hometown, where he worked. It was in a neighboring country, while I studied at med school in my country. Visiting was really hard due to the epidemic precautions, and to ease it, we got married, which meant easier access for me to visit him on holidays and weekends. We agreed that the marriage wouldn't be taken that seriously because I wanted my white wedding and everything, and he agreed with me on that. After the vows we took at the city hall maybe 2 months later, he proposed officially with a ring, asking for my hand to marry him after I finished med school. I said yes because we were so happy at that time. Then COVID calmed down and I started to stay at home longer, which meant I had to take care of the home. Don't get me wrong, I did all of that every time I got back home because he wasn't taking care of the home at all, so I had to deep clean everything anytime I visited. He made excuses that he worked long hour shifts, so he didn't have time. I understood and kept my part. I was cooking, deep cleaning, and studying for school, trying to be active for him and everything, but slowly he stopped having any interest in me. Since he didn't eat anything other than fries, grilled cheese, or pizza, we ate really unhealthy food and I gained weight from all the stress. He tried to point out when I was totally depressed that I was getting fat, even though I was trying to work out any time I had free time. He just totally destroyed my confidence by saying, "I think that your attempt to lose weight will be for nothing in the near future as your metabolism is slowing down." That totally destroyed me because all of my clothes were getting too small for me to wear while he was so skinny. Things got even worse when I had to take a part-time job during my studies because we were always out of money. I had to borrow money from my family and friends, then work long hours to pay them back so we could survive. I got exhausted and burnt out while still studying. He told me that the reason we didn't have money was because studying costs so much. In my country, studies are free, and we only had to pay for my accommodation, transport, and food, which I mostly started paying for myself with the part-time job while eating garbage food because of the lack of money. To my surprise though, he always had money for cigarettes, alcohol, and his games. He stopped complimenting me. Anytime I needed validation from him, he scoffed at me. One time I told him that my great-grandmother was sick and wouldn't be here for much longer, and that once the time came, I would need his support and for him to be there for me. When she died, he stayed at home and played games with his friends while I was grieving alone and attending the burial. We fought more and more each passing month because he stopped caring at all. I was begging him to take me on dates, to celebrate my and his birthday, to spend time together, but all the time he was either working or playing games. I played games with him because that was the only time I could get his attention and have at least some quality time with him. But soon he started to be angry and crabby anytime I did better in the game than him, anytime I was happy, anytime I had a good time with my friends. Soon, I resigned and stopped arguing. I was totally psychologically destroyed because he was gaslighting me all the time, controlling my connections with his family and friends even though we had great relations at the beginning. One time, we were drinking with his best friend, and as we were discussing certain topics, his friend sided with me. Once I expressed my opinion, which he was against, he snapped and started screaming at me, totally like a crazy person, calling me names and saying how shallow I am, and so on. His friend thought that he might get between us to protect me if he suddenly got violent. The next day, he apologized, but it left this weird gap between us. 3 years into the marriage, I caught him talking and making flirtatious jokes with one of the girls from our gaming community. I didn't like her since she was a typical pick-me girl who flirted with anyone in our community and always tried to outshine me. She played the victim card with him, claiming she was unhappy with her boyfriend and didn't know what to do. They stayed up until late in the morning, chatting in the game, discussing our relationship and my insecurities. I heard them since I was in bed in the next room. I told him many times that they were being loud and that I couldn't sleep. On PS, you can see who was in the party, and I thought to myself that since they were not alone, it was fine, but then they were alone and I heard it. It hurt me, and we had a big fight the next day. He gaslighted me, saying I was paranoid and that they were just friends and he was trying to help her and so on. I think you know where this is going. At that time, his manipulations and gaslighting totally brainwashed me, so I gave in and trusted him even though I had this terrible gut feeling. We fought about her a few more times because he wanted to attend our gaming community meeting in the summer, where she would also be. He told me that if I was going only to spy on him, he didn't want me to go. I said I trusted him and that I was going to have fun there too. Let's say the party was terrible in the end because they bonded. She is 23 years old and had a nice figure, while I, at that time, weighed about 90 kilograms and was totally burnt out. He even stood up for her when she got into a fight with another girl, while I tried to prove a point by being the trusting fiancé. So I was chatting with other friends and later got groped by a drunk guy. Let's say my husband was more attentive to her than he was to me. Anytime I tried to go to him and hug him, she would pull me away and act like my friend. When I got groped, I got drunker and tried to deal with my own PTSD from being at 17. I had a meltdown which finally got his attention. I was crying, feeling guilty about what had happened to me, and he was trying to calm me down. After the party, we went home. I paid for our travels and told him what happened, and he acted as if he wanted to protect me, but still tried to pry into why I was feeling guilty, as if I'd given the guy some signals or whatever. I tried to explain my experience, that it is the shame I carry since I was 17. Anyway, we got home and carried on with our lives. Soon, I got sick. I was attending my best friend's graduation when I got terrible pains and ended up in the hospital for acute surgery because I had a 6-centimeter cyst on my ovaries that twisted my fallopian tube and cut off the blood flow to it. While I was in the hospital in pain before the surgery, my best friend called my husband and told him everything, and still, I was the one who had to plan everything for him so he would come to my country and bring me stuff. I had to tell him what stuff, where to go, and which train to take, while he was absolutely cranky again that he had to go. When I got home after a week, he guilt-tripped me, saying I pulled him from work, that he spent his vacation time on me and had to deal with my family alone. Later, when I was still recovering from surgery and preparing for an exam at school, I was still cooking and cleaning for him. Suddenly, 1 week before my exam, he started being so attentive to me. He had sex with me twice, and both times he came very close to me, even though he knew we weren't protected. Before, it wasn't an issue as he always pulled out in time, but that last week he was really sloppy. I told him so, and he just apologized. Then he told me he was going with his friend from work to go bowling while I was leaving for my exam. He even started exercising beforehand and bought nice clothes without my knowing. When I left for my exam, right after it, when I got back to my room, I received a call from an unknown number. It was the boyfriend of the girl who had been flirting with my husband before. At first, I was confused, but then he explained everything. That she told him how she was in love with my husband and he was with her, and how they wanted to be together, that he was going to leave me, and so on. I was devastated. I was totally destroyed and messaged my husband. He confirmed everything, that he had been in touch with her and that the bowling with his friend was all a cover for him meeting her. During that day with her, he was still messaging me about how it was going with his friend and how he loved me and everything, so it was hard for me to believe what was happening. In those texts, he was passive-aggressive and manipulative too, telling me it was only a kiss and so on. I ditched my doctor appointment that I had that day after my exam because of my surgery and went straight back home with my best friend. Still, I was trying to learn the truth. During the breakup, we talked that day, we cried, and he told me how much of an idiot he was, that it was a mistake, and that he didn't want to lose me. I couldn't even look at him. My best friend helped me pack my stuff and leave. He asked me to give him another chance, and I told him I needed time. I went back to my parents, but soon I decided that if it was all true and it was just one thing and they just kissed, I could give him a chance. So we talked and he was happy with any condition I gave him. I wanted to do counseling, but he refused, and when I asked for their messages, he told me that they were all deleted. Regarding other things he did, he blocked her and explained to me that it was just temporary and so on. I still stayed at my parents' house without any money, totally lost, devastated, and depressed. He even came to visit me and told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to make up. It gave me hope that maybe we would find a way to make our relationship work. But as soon as I started pointing out that I needed his support, that I needed it more than ever, he started pulling away, playing the victim card about how messed up he was and how he didn't know what he wanted, how depressed he was. I was there to support him in the end, and I was trying to get him to therapy and talk him through it. I visited him a few times, but every time it seemed he was further from me. We slept together a few times, especially when I told him that if we were to be just friends, I was going to find somebody else. He was furious about it and agreed to be friends with benefits with me until we resolved our marriage. As time passed, he grew colder and colder, using gaslighting and manipulation on me, and started being distant. But still, he kept telling me how he wasn't in contact with her but wanted to clear some things with her since she apparently blocked him before they could even talk. I was against it at first, but then I found out he unblocked her and broke the promise he gave me. I made a scene asking what the hell was going on. I was a total mess and started swearing that if they were together, I would break her hands if she touched my cat. He again told me that wasn't the case, that they weren't in contact at all. Soon, I caught him back in our community from which he and she left when the cheating got revealed. He told me at that time that he wanted me to have at least somebody who would support me, but then I noticed them playing with my friends as if nothing happened. I was a total wreck. I went there and swore at that woman for what she did. She blocked me and they used it against me to turn my friends against me. They told them lies about how psychotic I am and how my husband is being stalked by me and so on. To some degree, yes, I was a total wreck from the lies and everything, and I apologized, but each time another blow came, I was losing it slowly. But I wasn't stalking him. I had, at that time, a connected PS account with him and just wanted to make sure that she stayed blocked as he promised, which he broke, of course. And since they weren't that close friends to us, they just stayed with them and believed them. I was left alone with nothing. My cat was at our place at that time. I was financially struggling, trying to find a new place where they would allow my cat. I wanted to kill myself from all the stress. Luckily, my family and my friends from school helped me, lent me money, and helped me move. I lost a lot of weight, worked hard, got a college fund, and ensured I stayed in school. I found a new flat where they allowed me to have my cat, so I got her home. All of this happened in less than 2 months. During that time, though, I contacted our mutual friend, my husband's best friend. The last time I talked to him, it was because I found out he knew about my husband going to that girl behind my back, and I was upset about how he could do that to me too. So I apologized and tried to explain my mental state at that time. He was reluctant at first, but agreed to call and have a little chat. He was always nice to me and liked to talk to me about games and certain topics, so he decided that we could try talking. The first call with him was when I first learned that my whole relationship with my husband was a lie. When I explained to him what was going on, he realized that my husband had been using me all this time and lying to everyone. He told me that my husband had emotionally cheated on me with her a month before they met, approximately a little before my surgery, and that he was calling her for hours while I stayed at home and cooked for him. He was boasting about his new girl that he was going to meet, that they actually slept together when he went to my country to meet her, and that he was still sleeping with her while acting as if we were going to get back together and slept with me too. Apparently, he kept me as plan B because the girl was unstable and uncertain about whether to officially take him as a partner or not. Apparently, he boasted that he wouldn't be alone no matter what, because I would never find out what happened if she said no to him. He spread rumors about how psychotic I am and that I stole from him and so on, to turn every single person against me. When I learned about his body shaming me when I was overweight in front of his friends, his complaints about how nagging I was, and how my girlfriends were flirting with him behind my back, I decided that this wasn't for me and that I should just leave and plot my revenge. Apparently, our whole financial situation was because he was spending money on cigarettes, games, alcohol, and things for himself, like a new headset, new controller, PS5, and computer. And he always lied to me. I was saving money by not eating properly, and I didn't have any new stuff because it always went into food and so on. For celebrations, we didn't give each other gifts. One time, I worked hard to save up for a game figure he wanted, but it cost too much. Yet, I got it anyway for Christmas. He gave me a candle and 2 mugs with a Lord of the Rings motif. He forgot about my 25th birthday, and when I sulked, he took me to buy clothes as he always intended to do. This way, I realized that all this time it was all a lie, and I was used. Since I foolishly deleted all of our conversations because I couldn't bear to look at them, I had to gather new evidence and baited him into believing I still missed him. I messaged him about those last nights we slept together and how it was hot and so on. He replied to me and I saved the screenshots. Then I got into my community and tried to apologize for my blow up during the game, explaining that I was a total wreck and didn't want them to think I was unstable. They were accepting and told me it was understandable and they hoped I would come back. I explained to them that she blocked me, and since they were playing together all this time, I didn't have a chance to join them due to the PS policy. They didn't know about it, of course, and were mad that they hadn't been told. I explained that there was much more to it and that I would explain it later once I was ready to play with them again. Then I sent the screenshots to that woman and told her that during the time they were starting the relationship and he slept with her, he was sleeping with me too. I made sure that in those screenshots I included the dates I was with him because I learned that one time she arrived to him the same day I left. I told her that he slept with her in my sheets and that he didn't even bother to change after he slept with me. At first, she told me we would talk later about this, but in the end, she blocked me because he convinced her to avoid me and played the card that it wasn't true, that he slept just with her and not me, and that they started after he ended things with me. But it was too late. I told everyone in our gaming community what he actually did, and they finally got on my side fully and refused to ever play with him. I created a new, clean platform for our community without those two. His now ex-best friend decided that he doesn't have anything to say to him anymore and just keeps in touch like old friends since they occasionally work together, but mostly talks to me and plays games with me. He and his girlfriend gave me support and helped me realize how bad the abusive relationship was, that he was psychologically abusing me and using me all this time. I still have a lot to recover from, but once I got my revenge, they broke up in the end, and got on my feet, I no longer struggled with depression as severely as I did in that relationship. I still have a lot of scars and wounds and have a problem trusting people, but overall I'm happier than ever. We are getting divorced, I'm still studying, got a future workplace secured, and overall have my cat with me. I lost 25 kilograms in 3 months, got a tattoo I always wanted, and I spoil myself and my lovely cat as we deserve. Sorry for the long post, but I wanted to finalize it. There were many more issues on his part, but if I were to write it all down, we would be here for a really long time. Anyway, thanks for listening to my rant, and sorry for the grammar mistakes. I'm not a native speaker. Edit corrected hopefully most of the errors. This next story was posted in the same subreddit by a user named Tink the Chi. The post was made in 2022 and is titled My Deceased Husband and His Many Secrets. My husband was, by all accounts, healthy in 2020. He had a cardiac situation that required surgery in August of that year, a complete surprise. He called me at work while he was driving and said he thought he was having a stroke. He mentioned he had chest pain and I told him it was a heart attack. I asked him to pull over and dial 911. The EMTs came, hooked him up, and promptly told me it wasn't a heart attack, but that he was being taken to the hospital. Before the EMTs arrived, he had his phone. I asked him if the code was X to open it. He said yes, then looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry." I honestly didn't think anything of this because I was panic-stricken. We had been together for 10 years. It was a second marriage for both of us. I loved this man with all my heart. He appeared to be treating me well, very well. 9 days later, he was removed from life support. He had incurred several strokes on the operating table. I was devastated. He was 55 and I was nearly 57. His mother and sister came from across the country while he was in the hospital. They stayed with me for 3 weeks. One night, a few days after he passed, I found a box of old phones. Many phones. He had kept them all. I went through them looking for old texts, etc. At first, it was wonderful. Then, for reasons I can't explain, I went into his call log on one of the phones. There was a number that had been calling him every morning on the way to work, and he had been calling / they were calling every night on the way home, every workday. Without thinking, I called the number from my phone, but it was disconnected. The name Heather popped up on my phone when I called it, and on his phone it said HX. I went into his Gmail account. I had never done this before. He left it signed in on his laptop, which had the same code, to open it as his phone. I searched for this name and found several email messages he had sent to himself with attachments. He had been having an affair with this woman for 2.5 years. At some point, she had told him she was pregnant. She was 30, and again, he was 55 when he died. I sat there stunned. I searched through the other phones and found 299 screenshots of BBM conversations in the photo gallery. That number is not an exaggeration. There were 299. They were having sex frequently during the day. He was never out at night. He was leaving work early, driving to her, and they were having sex. He was taking her shopping, out to lunch, etc. She was kind enough to include photos of her at her workplace, and I had her name, so I called her there. She sat in stunned silence as I told her who I was and asked her if there was a baby. She blurted out no. Months went by. I became obsessed with this girl. It was affecting my mental health. His daughter came by one night. I recalled a story he had told me, and she said, "No, that's not right. Mom told me X." Something didn't sit right with me, so I reached out to his ex-wife, to whom he had been married for 26 years. We had never met before. He made her out to be a horrible person. She sat and held my hand in the car when we met, and she cried when I told her my story. He had cheated on her as well. The worst part was that everything he had told me about his life was a lie. Everything. He created a fake person, someone he thought I would like, and he lived as that person. He kept me apart from his ex-wife because she could expose him. A year later, I found an appointment card for a therapist he had been seeing. I knew he was in therapy, but he told me it was for PTSD. It wasn't. The person he was seeing was a therapist specializing in sex addiction and affairs. To make a long story short, I ended up calling this person, telling him my husband had passed and talking to him. He told me my husband had been having sex with men since he was in his early 20s. He told me he knew about the girlfriend and that she had been pregnant, but my husband rarely talked about her. He said he knew my husband was lying much of the time. I got STD tested, a full panel of testing. I was devastated. On the day I got the negative tests, I drove home sobbing and screaming at him in the car. Then I found the recordings. He had been recording all of his telephone conversations with everyone for years, and they were on his laptop. The 30-year-old, I had every discussion they had ever had. He even recorded their meetings in person. I reached out to her husband because I wanted him to be aware, and I found out they had been separated since 2018. I sent him everything I had, recordings and screenshots. He thanked me. We are still friends today. He is still single, and so am I. This journey has been devastating but eye-opening. I've learned a lot about narcissistic personality disorder since I found all of this, and that has been helpful. His therapist told me he didn't love himself and he couldn't love anyone else. I believe this. Thanks for reading this ridiculously long story. I'm interested in sharing and commenting here. User Dino Lavasaur said, "I'm just so stunned. I'm so fortunate that we have groups like this we can talk to without having to worry about judgment. We can just share our stories to get those thoughts out of our head and hopefully start the healing." User Kintsugi Warrior said, "Thank you so much for sharing. If possible, would you share more details of your conversations with the ex-wife and what she told you? So kind of her to take your hand and cry with you. These people are a walking lie." Under this comment, OP said the following: "I told her he kept us apart so she could never invalidate his stories. She told me he married again to get a new audience. She was right. She confirmed for me, as did his sister much later, that the stories he had told me were all lies. For example, he told me he had a business when they lived out west and that they had been relatively well off. He described their house, the boat they had, etc. He told me he had built a house that the family was going to move into but never did because of his wife. There was no business, there was no house he had built, and his stories about being self-employed were all fabrications. He grew up in South Africa, and he told me amazing stories about the animals that lived in their backyard or would walk through at times. None of this was true. They lived in a very big city. There were so many lies, and I realize now that I didn't know him at all. That's the irony. She did. They had been together since they were teenagers. The fake life he created with me and later with co-workers was a fantasy he used to stoke his ego. She has been a massive source of support for me. I apologize to her for never insisting that we meet. The reality was that he painted her in such a horrific light that I didn't feel that I could ever meet her. A deleted user said, "Being duped by an intimate relation is a catastrophe for me. I caught my parents duping me regularly when I had barely learned to speak, and all my relationships in life would be stained by that. As suspicious as I am now, getting duped takes me a long time to forgive myself." User Stick to It said, "I never want to wish death on anyone, but in this case, you got closure." OP left the following response under this comment: "Well, I found out what I did, but I don't know if there is more. There is money missing that I can't trace. My greatest fear is that he hurt someone or did something terrible and someone will come looking for me. I took back my maiden name and sold our property. Real closure would mean I can confront him, which will never happen. I regret not going onto his laptop every day. I trusted him with my life, and if someone had told me in 2016 he was having an affair with a 30-year-old, I wouldn't have believed them. He treated me well, so I would never have reason to believe he was doing anything wrong.